Nova Butterfly versus the Forces of Adolescence by MrE. Chapter 1. Nova's got a brand new wand. Connor let out a sleepy yawn as the sun rose over the peaceful, quiet city of Echo Creek. Some low-hanging clouds lazily blocking the sunlight from hitting the small corner of the earth. The overcast making it even harder than it should have been to fully wake the groggy teen. Today was October 26th, a day written out on the calendar, one of the many moments that marched ever closer to the giant mass of land and water hurtling through space and completing its lap around the gassy star in the center of the galaxy. But today was also a very important day. An incredibly special day that meant so much to the young teenager that he was willing to get out of his warm, cozy bed at 6 in the morning, on an on-school day mind you, slap on the brand new tuxedo his parents bought for him, which he hated with an unyielding passion, and hop into the family's highly illegally modified minivan and drive over to her house with sleep and their late-night texting still biting at his eyes. But he would bear it, trudge on like a good soldier, because today, his best friend in the entire world, Nova Annalise Butterfly, was turning 14. Nova was the daughter of local town celebrities Marco Diaz and Star Butterfly, two best friends who lived out the entire fairy tale cliché. Star was a foreign exchange student who lived with Marco and his parents, becoming fast friends with the young man. They grew up together until they realized their feelings for one another, and fell in love, a perfectly normal and expected standard. Well, except for the fact that Star Butterfly was a magical princess from another dimension. That was different. Certainly flips the script. Star was the young princess from a dimension called Muni, sent to Earth to practice control of her magical wand, a powerful object that was capable of unmeasurable feats of magic. So naturally, with such an item and lack of parental supervision from the king and queen, Star abused the hell out of it, often using it to shortcut her way through life while fending off a monster named Ludo and his army's attempts to take it from her. Luckily, Marco knew karate and helped out. Connor had heard their crazy adventures growing up, from the couple themselves to legends and rumors that everyone in town seems to know of. Monster Arm, Toffee, the Blood Moon Ball, riding unicorns into battle, robbing treasure from a bunny pirate ship. There was never a shortage of stories, and Connor was eager to hear them all. Connor and his family moved from Canada after a massive falling out between his parents and the rest of the Sinclair tree. His parents, Henry and Rachel, were inventors by nature and simply didn't fit in with the others since they were goofy, fun-loving, and laid-back people that didn't know the concept of embarrassment, which was a good and bad thing in equal measure. Connor remembered spending the first few months here by himself, tinkering with the Young Inventors kit his parents bought for him for his 7th birthday. 2nd grade wasn't easy for a shy kid, and even more so when everything and everyone you knew now existed in another country. Connor never thought he was going to make friends, until Nova Butterfly decided to march up to him and drag him into their friendship, one that continued on to this day, and Connor couldn't be happier. 7 years as best friends, with no sign of stopping anytime soon. And today was Nova's 14th birthday, previously mentioned at this point. And by Munian traditions, she would be receiving the Munian magic wand from her mother and becoming its new keeper, learning how to perform and master its spells while keeping it out of the hands of evil, which frightened Connor since Nova could easily get into large amounts of trouble without any magical assistance. And now she was getting an all-powerful wand. Connor hoped his parents' insurance on him was up to date.
"We're here,"
Henry exclaimed cheerfully from the front seat, looking at his loving wife and son with a gleam of mischief in his eyes. Connor knew something was up, something more than Nova's wand ceremony. His father looked as he always had, towering both over his mother and himself with short, dirty blonde hair and stormy gray eyes, his normal messy hair slicked back with gel and thoroughly combed through, the gray suit and shirt he was wearing ironed to perfection. His mother was also fixed up, so to speak. Her normally long straight black hair curled, her green eyes sparkled with barely contained joy. Her blue and white sundress very unusual attire for her to wear, even to a formal event. Connor briefly wondered if his parents had been replaced by aliens or monsters, because there was no way these two people in front of him were his family. The Sinclair branch of California did not dress up. Their clothing was usually funny images on shirts with really bad puns, pictures from their TV shows, or dirtied, oily, sometimes burnt, plain clothing due to their jobs as inventors. Dressing up was not a thing. In fact, Connor hadn't even known his parents owned any sort of fancy clothing at all. "Honey?" Rachel called softly to her obviously distracted son. "Are you sure you don't want to comb your hair? It is pretty messy and it's a big day today." Connor scoffed, ruffling his hair even more simply to prove a point. "It's just Nova getting the wand. It's not like we're getting married or anything. She's just my best friend." Henry and Rachel smiled knowingly at each other, wise to how Connor really felt about the young magical princess. Connor stared at himself in the reflection of the car window, trying to subtly fix himself before they arrived at the Diaz butterfly household. His wavy jet black hair was a mess as usual, with his forest green eyes peering back at him behind a pair of wireframe circular glasses. His tuxedo was black, with a white collared dress shirt and undone red tie. "Dad, can you help me with the tie?"
Nope.
Henry responded cheerfully.
I don't know how to tie them.
Mom, little help? Rachel shook her head gently.
"Not a clue. You know we're not fancy dress people. Such concepts are beyond us. If you want a thermal-powered toaster, that we can do, but tying a tie? Such is madness we cannot comprehend."
The trio laughed loudly as they pulled in front of their destination. Nova took a deep, calming breath, trying her hardest not to let her fear show. Today was the big day. Today she took up the task bestowed upon each butterfly before her. Today was the day she lived up to her mother's legacy. Ugh! Am I so nervous? Nova scolded herself, peering carefully into the mirror and slapping herself with her hands, her heart-covered cheeks shifting between a multitude of colors like lights at a rave. Nova leaned back, taking her full appearance in the mirror. She had long, light brown hair, like her father, but it was shaped exactly like her mother's. Her electric blue eyes blazed with intense emotions, mostly fear and anxiety, while her pinkish hearts on her cheeks flared uncontrollably, the two moles located on either side often overshadowed by her magical birthmarks. Perhaps it was the lack of her usual attire that was throwing her off, given that she usually wore one of her father's old red hoodies with her mother's devil headband, and often paired the two treasured items with a knee-length skirt. Today, however, she was trading those clothes in for a pinkish-purple dress that covered her entire body. It looked cute, but it was forced upon by her mother. Nova began playing with her hair absent-mindedly, twisting two thick strands of it that replaced her star bangs with two long braided strands that hung on either side of her face, framing it perfectly. "Novi," a young teasing voice called to her, "your boyfriend is here." Nova whirled around angrily to find her 6-year-old brother, Sol Diaz, sticking his tongue out at her, a playful intent hidden within his eyes. Sol had Marco's hair spikes, but his were a dark brownish blonde, a rather unique hair color amongst the family. There was no spade, diamond, clover, or heart on his cheeks, but he was a human-munion hybrid all the same. He was the same shade as Marco's skin color, while Nova shared her mother's paleness. "Sol! What did I say about calling Connor my boyfriend? You'll give him the wrong idea!" Nova snarled at her younger sibling. Sol gave her a cheeky smile. "Connor? I was talking about Roman, but I guess someone has her best friend on her mind." Nova flushed brightly, staring daggers at Sol, who laughed uncontrollably. "Connor and Novi sitting in a tree. Incomplete DENEL. It's denial, you brat. So you admit it." Nova growled, clenching her fist tightly while Sol raced off, trying to get a head start from Nova's wrath. Nova bit her lip, moving to her bedroom and slowly opening the blinds to see that Connor and his family indeed arrived. Nova could feel her heart skip a beat at the sight of her best friend, but she quickly calmed it, pulling away and trying to forget the image of Connor dressed up for the first time in the 7 years they knew each other. Too bad she'll be seeing him all day today. "We're just friends," Nova told herself. "Don't live up the cliche. Ignore how well it worked for Mom and Dad." Nova jumped at the sound of sudden knocking, loudly echoing throughout the house. Nova took another calming breath and ran downstairs to greet her best friend. Connor stared blankly at the creature that opened the door, the child-sized raccoon staring at him with annoyance in her eyes. Rocky was the family pet, though if she was picked up by Star or created by her, Connor was never sure. All he knew is that Rocky had been around as long as he had been best friends with Nova, and Rocky did not like the young man for whatever reason, probably due to the nature of being the watchdog of the children. Rocky openly glared at him, while Connor tried to ignore how strange it was to see Rocky stand on her hind legs effortlessly, cutely holding on to the doorknob yet barring his path. "Rocky!" Nova's voice called out from the stairway, causing Connor's cheeks to flush at her unexpected call. "Let them in! Today's the big deal." Rocky narrowed her eyes towards Connor, dropping down onto all fours before striding away, disappearing into the kitchen, presumably to make her breakfast. Connor walked in and felt the wind rush out of his lungs at the sight of Nova, looking extremely pretty in her dress, the twin braids loosely and swaying distractingly in the wind.
Hi, Novi.
Henry happily waved towards the young girl as he and Rachel pushed way past their awestruck son.
"Looking absolutely adorable,"
Rachel cooed at the sight of the girl. Nova blushed politely, rubbing the back of her head nervously. "Thank you, Mrs. Sinclair." "Doesn't she look cute, Connor?" Connor openly glared at his smiling parents, unable to believe they would ask him such a question. "Well, Four Eyes, do I?" Nova asked with a hint of humor in her otherwise casual voice before realizing who else was in the room with them. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, Nova stopped dead in her tracks when the older couple burst out laughing, patting their son on the back as they struggled to get their words out.
"Four Eyes? Such a cute nickname."
"Dom," Connor whined, wishing he could die right on the spot.
Go ahead, Nova. Call him Four Eyes.
"Dad," Connor complained.
"Well, if you don't like your nickname, you can always get contacts."
Connor opened his mouth to explain why exactly he hated contacts, but Nova beat him to the punch, quickly leaning forward with a clear, threatening tone. "You are not allowed to get contacts, Connor. You hate them and you know it, so I guess you better get used to the name." Connor tried to ignore the silent laughter of his parents as he responded, "Don't worry. You've been calling me that for years. I'm used to it. Besides, it's the only way I could figure out if you've been taken over by something evil."
"Haha, I don't know about that."
Soul's teasing voice came from out of nowhere, the young child having switched out of his pajamas and into the most adorable little tuxedo, perfectly matching Connor's as he rushed towards the teen at top speed.
"She acts so weird around you. You probably couldn't tell. Catch me!"
Nova's glare melted into a small, joyful smile as she watched as Connor lifted up Soul effortlessly, holding him carefully into the air before lifting him over his head, carrying the little child on his shoulders, Soul unable to stop the happiest grin from appearing from his face. "Whoa, little guy," Connor said. "You're pretty big. You sure you're not too old for these piggyback rides?" Soul pouted, shaking his head rapidly.
"Never! Who told you such lies? It was Novi, wasn't it?"
Soul playfully glanced towards Nova, shooting her a wink while Connor bounced the small boy on his shoulders. "Nah, your sister told me you love them. Besides, she likes to hop on my back and make me carry her whenever she gets too tired. Huh, Novi?"
"Really?"
Nova didn't like Soul's searching tone.
"How funny, Novi."
"Anyway," Nova interrupted loudly, "we need to meet up with Mom and Dad in the backyard so we can head to Muni."
Ooh, Muni.
Muni.
Rachel and Henry giggled together.
I can't wait. I brought the camera.
"And I brought the taser. Onward to battle, Connie."
"Yes, General Soul." Nova shook her head, silently chuckling as Connor raced to the backyard, a cheering Soul on his back, arms outstretched like he just ordered the charge into the fray.
"Your little brother is so cute,"
Rachel said.
Sometimes.
He knows he's cute and what he can get away with."
You excited?
Henry asked quizzically.
It's a big day.
Nova nodded, a look of unsure and worry etched on her face.
"Yeah, it's a big deal. I hope I'm up to it."
The couple smiled at her, wrapping her up in a giant hug. "You'll do fine, Nova. You got your parents. They'll help you, and Connor will too. He's very fond of you." "Well, yeah," Nova replied with an obvious tone.
He's my best friend.
Henry and Rachel simply smiled at the young princess, quickly chasing after the boys into the backyard. Nova nodded to herself, quietly but slowly heading back to her room to get the last thing she needed for the event.
Soul, get off of Connor. He's a guest.
Marco gently chastised his son, frowning at his behavior.
Oh, relax, Marco. He's just having fun and Connor doesn't mind, do you, Connor?
Star nudged the teen, wiggling her fingers to distract Soul from Marco's scolding. Of course not, Connor agreed. It's all good, Mr. Diaz. Marco let out a defeated sigh before looking at his family, a nervous edge to his face. Marco and Star were not much different from when they were teenagers, though there were some new changes. Marco was no longer a thin, scrawny boy, his body finally shaping based on his karate training and constant fighting of monsters. He was now a head taller than Star, and was looking really sharp in the tuxedo combo that seemed to be popular around the household. Star was no longer the cute, adorable girl she once was, her body filling out with womanly charms and grace, giving her an unearthly beauty. She was taller than she had been before, her hair no longer the length of her body, but just a bit shorter due to her added height. As ruling Queen of Muni, she learned to morph her face into a serious regal pose, but alas, she was still the same Star butterfly from all those years ago. She was wearing her royal clothing, a simple yet dignified dress of varying shades of blue, the crown sitting comfortably on her head.
Well, you two look amazing,
Henry complimented, fist bumping with Marco as Star and Rachel squealed, "Hugs!" at the top of their lungs and hugged each other affectionately.
All set?
Rachel asked, winking at Marco and Star. The two became bright red, nodding their head in agreement while sharing a shy smile. Ready for Nova's ceremony? Connor asked cautiously, wondering if he was missing the bigger picture here.
Of course, of course. Nice suit,
Marco said, giving Connor a thumbs of approval. Thanks. It was a special occasion.
All right, I'm ready,
Nova called from the inside of the house. As one, everyone turned to face the princess. Her pose was perfect. She walked with the grace not often found in her step, a small, modest crown at the top of her head.
Looking great, sweetie.
Marco smiled brightly.
Watch out. Got a pretty girl walking through.
Star teased. Nova made her way to everyone else, nervous smiles and all.
Hey, Marco, buddy. Mind fixing my tie?
Of course,
Marco agreed, waving the other man's request off as if it was nothing. Oh, Mr. Diaz, could you help me too? Connor questioned, moving forward to line up behind his father.
Oh, Nova knows how to tie ties. Ask her.
Connor turned around slowly as not to knock off Soul, Nova's gaze covered in disbelief.
Seriously, Four Eyes?
Nova softly scolded, sliding her hands around his neck and fixing his collar before beginning to tie the tie together.
You don't know how to tie a tie?
Be happy I even dressed up for you, Novi. Nova said nothing, focusing on the red tie, ignoring the glance of Soul, who must have been looking cocky as hell, mentally recording this moment for future teasing. There, Nova told Connor, patting his chest unnecessarily before pulling away.
All set.
Thanks, Novi.
Enough talking!
Star shouted, drawing her dimensional scissors and holding them dramatically in the air.
It's time to go to Muni.
Star, calm down. It's still 7. People are asleep.
Muni!
Cutting a hole into the fabric of reality and making travel between dimensions possible.
Ooh,
Rachel muttered, impressed by the swirling portal.
a whirlpool of terror and death.
Awesome!
Rachel and Henry went in first, the sheer thrill and excitement of finally seeing a new dimension overpowering their concern for safety. Star and Marco followed closely behind, their bodies filled to the brim with eagerness.
Come on, Connie, to Muni!
Soul cheered with excitement, bouncing wildly up and down on his shoulders. Nova stayed quiet when Connor took a step forward, stopping and turning to his best friend as she failed to move alongside with him. Novi? Nova remained silent, unsure if she could handle such responsibility. She wasn't her mother. Star was this amazing, perfect woman. And Nova? She wasn't Star. She would go down in history as the worst butterfly to ever wield the wand. She would bring shame to her family name. How could anyone expect her to? Nova blinked out of her thoughts, peering curiously at Connor's hand gripping hers tightly, reassuring as he pulled her along, slowly but firmly. Sol turned back to his big sister, grinning like he just won the lottery as Nova felt her cheeks flame, her hearts lightly glowing as the trio made their way through the portal. Muni was not the same as it had been during Star's childhood. During Star's time, it was a brimming utopian perfection of 12th century living, with wizards and alchemists pushing their wares on the streets onto unsuspecting citizens, buyers usually receiving what they pay for, though, once in a while, they fell victim to a rather nasty scheme or scam. Luckily, the doctor and his leeches were always nearby to perform some medical procedures. Now, with travel and trade between Earth having been established and finalized, Muni had grown rapidly, catching quickly to the non-magical dimension. Instead of its citizens living in the 17th century, they now lived in the 19th century. Muni blended traditional Munian structures with the design of Victorian-era London. Cobbled streets now ran everywhere, with the hut buildings still remaining, but now stacked like skyscrapers. The fashion now a strange mixture of suits and townsfolk attire, with the older adults refusing to change their time-honored style, and the younger generation rebelling with their suits and peasant caps. Horse-drawn carriages, stores, the village now growing into a fairly modest city. Muni was on the up and up, though many questioned if it was a good idea to open the Magic Academy next to the unstable Alchemy Lab. The group arrived at the base of the palace, which remained as it always had, to the throngs of cheering people. Nova could feel her nervousness grow at the sight of so many familiar faces, and only Connor's hand prevented her from fleeing. Uncle Ferguson waved at her cheerfully from behind his Secret Service wall. Uncle Alfonso smiled, with his pixie wife politely nodding her way. There was Aunt Ponyhead, still majestic and magical as ever next to her husband, a full-bodied white Mustang with a black mane named Stahl, and their daughter Uni, a pure black and gray full-bodied unicorn who had this nasty habit of setting things on fire when she was startled. And she was always startled. Grandma and Grandpa Diaz made funny faces their way, their age still a number and not appearing on their person at all. And at the top of the imposing staircase was Moon Butterfly, heart-shaped hair and refined dress, and River Butterfly, still short and clothed as if he had been hunting the rare Jabberwocky. The others waited patiently at the base of the stairs, Star and Marco reaching for their daughter's hand. Connor hesitantly let go of his best friend's hand, only for her to snatch it back when he released it.
Nova, it is time,
Star said firmly, yet gently, not used to using her royal voice on her own child. Connor let out a sigh, trying to ignore all the stares and smirks of the crowd as he led Nova forward, muttering under his breath how much she owed him. The family, with Sol riding on Connor's shoulders, met with Moon and River, bowing together once Sol had leapt off Connor. Nova finally slid her hand away from Connor's as the boy stood to one side, Moon smiling proudly at Nova as Star pulled out the wand. The wand had gone through a sort of upgrade since Star received it into her care. It had 2 white wings, outstretched skyward as if preparing to take flight, a pinkish light purple circular center with a fully completed gold star in the middle, with 2 varying shades of blue and a snowflake design centering the star with a few red hearts placed within. A gold butterfly-shaped figure where the wand and hilt met with an alternating diamond-shaped pattern of pink and purple running down the hilt itself. With a flick of her wand, Star's hair rose upward, forming into the heart shape traditionally worn by the Queen of Muni. Star raised her wand high into the sky, a display of powerful yet harmless fireworks catching the attention of everyone who was watching, silencing the entire crowd in a moment.
We,
Star spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the hushed cityscape,
are gathered here today in honor of the royal wand being passed on from mother to daughter. Nova Annalise Butterfly, please step forward.
Nova took a step forward, wondering what she was going to have to do. Was there a speech? An oath? Maybe she would have to fight her mother for the wand. Star wasn't really clear on what exactly happened at the wand transfer ceremony, and she never truly explained it either. Star beamed blissfully at her daughter.
Here you go, catch!
Nova's face fell into surprise as Star haphazardly tossed the wand towards her, catching the young princess off guard as she struggled to react in time to grab the powerful magical object. Nova tried to hold onto it when it fell into her hands, but it quickly slipped out, rising into the air before falling back to the ground. Nova reached out, trying her hardest to keep herself steady while the wand fell into her waiting hands.
Star Butterfly,
Moon's tone took on a scolding edge.
You do not throw powerful objects like that.
It was very reckless.
Oh, relax, Mom.
Star answered, wrapping her arm around her mother's shoulder.
I knew Nova would catch it. Besides, I want to see what the wand looks like for my little girl.
Star, Moon started before being hushed loudly by Star. There was a swirl of black and white magic that enveloped the wand, blinding everyone to the new form of the magical item. Though, Nova could see, and she seemed awed by its new appearance. And as quickly as it came, the magic faded, and Nova gingerly held her new wand in her hands, surprise and glee written all over her face. The wand was simple. It was a stereotypical magician's wand. Black circular hilt with the white tip. Star and Marco shared a look, tears building in their eyes at the simple design, dozens of memories filling their minds. When Nova was younger, Marco and Star used to perform magic shows for the fledgling princess. Marco would dress up, tuxedo, top hat, cape, the standard magician's attire, and used a fake wand similar to the wand Nova now possessed, to perform magic tricks for her, while Star remained hidden somewhere nearby with the real wand, giving the illusion that Marco was the magical one. Nova loved it, and while she did eventually find out the truth behind the little act, it warmed Marco and Star's hearts so that she loved it so much that she wanted her wand to be the one that brought her so much joy as a child.
Well, that's it.
Star told everyone simply, ruffling her hair back to her usual style.
Really? That's it?
Nova eyed the surrounding people carefully, wondering if this was some sort of evil trick.
Pretty much. Don't let it fall to evil. Be responsible, yada yada yada.
Star told Nova, smirking at her shocked expression. Nova held the wand tightly, a rush of magic flowing through her entire body.
Why don't you try it out, Nova?
Marco asked her, wondering what would Nova's first spell be. Nova nodded, excited yet fearful. She rose the wand high into the air, and... Like Mother! Moon's voice was completely deadpan as the panicked cries of the people filled the air. The burning rainbow that hung high over Muni glowing brightly and warmly as it rained flaming confetti to the city below. Like daughter! Star chuckled while Nova and Connor raced back and forth, pouring buckets of water and unleashing torrents of the substance everywhere they could.
Yeah.
River coughed, eyeing his wife carefully. I believe you mean like grandmother, like mother, like daughter. Moon narrowed her eyes at her husband. River, hush!
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Star quickly jumped in, leaning off of Marco's arm and grinning towards her mother.
You did the flaming rainbow too?
Moon felt an uncharacteristic blush appear on her face.
Well, it wasn't as big as yours or Nova's.
Nonsense,
River exclaimed.
it was twice the size, and also rained down ice cream along with flaming confetti.
River!
Mom!
Yes, dear?
River asked innocently, unaware what he had accidentally revealed. His blank stare too much for Moon to handle.
Nothing, dear.
I guess flaming rainbows are a butterfly thing.
Marco teased, earning a glare from his mother-in-law, a grin from his wife, with a panic-fueled Nova finally succeeding at dousing the fiery refracted light.
By the way, Star, where is Glossaric?
Moon questioned, wondering why the index being had yet to appear.
Yes,
River chimed in, glancing around inquiringly.
he's not hiding because he owes me for that last poker game we played. Is he?
Moon slowly turned to her husband, staring daggers at his searching face.
River, dear.
Yes, love?
You told me you had stopped with the gambling.
Moon glared, her lips turning downwards into her iconic frown.
Well, Glossaric and I have a gentleman's arrangement, and...
River, dear?
River faltered.
Yes, dear?
We will talk about this later.
River gulped, knowing full well this was not going to end well.
Yes, dear,
he murmured softly, defeated and eager to enjoy the remainder of the event in peace.
And now, where is Glossaric, Star?
Moon turned to her daughter, still in angry queen mode.
Well...
Star stalled, looking away from her mother as she tried to come up with a convincing lie. Marco stared at his wife, eyebrow raised.
You left him at home, didn't you?
Star anxiously giggled, shrugging nonchalantly before taking shelter and protection behind Marco.
Star!
Moon yelled.
Her voice carrying throughout all of Muni.
a familiar sound to anyone growing up during Star's childhood. "He's fine," Star defended, holding tightly onto Marco's shoulder while peering fearfully from behind her husband. "He's probably with Rocky. They're like best friends." Glossaric and Rocky openly glared at one another.
I said, do you have any fours?
Glossaric asked, clenching his cards in his fist tightly. Rocky simply walked away, smacking the magical tutor with a flick of her tail.
Get back here! I know you have fours!
Glossaric floated after the retreating raccoon. Marco scoffed.
Yeah, they're like the bestest of friends.
Before Moon could further scold Star, there was a loud chiming of a bell, catching the attention of every single person within earshot. Marco and Star stared lovingly towards each other, the moment they waited for so long finally arriving.
The wedding's starting!
Ferguson shouted excitedly, startling his Secret Service bodyguards into drawing their guns, angrily staring at the president for the false alarm as he made his way into the palace. Nova and Connor stared at each other curiously. "Wedding?" Nova and Connor muttered at once, unable to keep the awe out of their joint voices as they took sight of the transformed throne room. The room was no longer spacious. Dozens and dozens of wooden pews filled every available inch of the room. Beings from various dimensions poured into the majestic palace and took their seats. Moon, River, Raphael, and Angie decided on the second row for their choice of venue. "Nova, what's going on?" Connor asked slowly, eyeing everything carefully. I don't know," Nova admitted, wondering what single event could bring so many kingdoms and worlds together. Even age-old enemies sat next to each other, pacified and content despite their close proximity to one another.
"Ah, Nova!"
A thick, heavily accented call from the doorway. The pair turned around to find themselves face to face with Nova's beloved uncle, Yevgeny Bulgoyubov, or as he was once known as, Buff Frog. He was the same as he always was. Yellow bulbous eyes, bat wings on his head, a large, round body that was a lighter shade of green now that he was older. "Uncle Yevgeny!" Nova let out a delighted cheer, wrapping her arms around the giant amphibious monster lovingly.
"It is good to see you, Nova. And you too, Connor."
"Hey, Mr. Bulgabuff."
"Just call me Buffrog or Yevgeny, Connor. My name, you butcher far too well."
Connor blushed in embarrassment, but Nova nudged his side lovingly, shooting him a comforting smile. "Why are you here, Uncle Yevgeny?" Nova asked, unsure why he would leave his fountain home in the Diaz backyard to come to Muni. Buff Frog was very fond of Earth, and was never really eager to return to the place of his birth.
"Why, your parents' wedding, of course,"
Yevgeny answered enthusiastically.
"It is not every day your mother finally gets to take your father's last name."
Realization broke out onto Nova's face, her eyes shining with wonder and joy. "Of course! Mom can finally take Dad's name now that I have the wand." Connor raised his hand to interrupt. "I'm still a bit lost here." Nova shook her head disappointedly at Connor. "I told you a dozen times, Connor. In Muni, the only person who can legally use the wand is a butterfly." But Connor still wasn't fitting the pieces together. "Ludo tries to take it from your mom all the time. If he gets it..."
"Nova did say legally. Anyone can use the wand, but Munian law dictates that only a butterfly may rightfully wield its power. Though, I do not know if this extends to Earth. Star Butterfly was the first princess in Munian history to actually train in another dimension. Such matters were not considered and very unclear."
"Wait, doesn't that mean Ludo will come after you now?" Connor couldn't keep the fear out of his voice. "Let him try," Nova beamed confidently. "I've got my parents, I've got the wand, and you got my back. Right, Connor?" "Of course, Nova. Always." Connor smiled towards his best friend. Nova coughed loudly, fighting off the blush as she glanced around the room. "So, Uncle Yevgeny, where's Victor?"
"Alas, he is home, babysitting his siblings. Chekhov, Dolph, Steve, and Rosalind are still young, not yet ready to control themselves in public."
"We'll see him Monday at school."
Bridesmaids and groomsmen, line up with your partners,
a random voice called over the booming crowd. Nova was unsurprised to see Uncle Ferguson smartly dressed in a black tuxedo and a red tie, walking up to his head of security, Cassie. A serious-looking blonde with piercing gray eyes who was as tall as Ferguson was pudgy, Cassie wearing a very familiar pinkish-purple dress. Nearby, Uncle Alfonso was dressed in the same suit with his pixie wife, hovering close by. The final pairing was Ponyhead wearing a flower of similar color as the dress Cassie wore on her mane, and Stahl who opted to wear a small red tie around his neck.
All right!
A small, shrill woman called, clipboard in her hands. Obviously the wedding planner given her assertive nature and the veins popping out of her forehead.
Ferguson and Cassie, check. Alfonso and Lillian, check. Ponyhead and Stahl, check. Wait a minute. I'm missing a couple. I am missing a couple! Where are Nova Butterfly and Connor Sinclair?
Huh? What? The noise escaped Nova and Connor's lips before they could realize the tiny woman gripped the two tightly by the wrists and dragged them to join the rest of the wedding party.
Wait, we're in the wedding?
Nova asked, unable to keep the whine out of her voice.
Duh, Novi.
Sold teased, walking around his big sister's legs like he was part cat.
But, Mom didn't tell us.
She knew you'd run for it if you found out she paired you with Connor,
Sol explained, laughing at Nova's discomfort. It was only then the pair realized that they were wearing the same outfits as the other groomsmen and bridesmaids. They felt silly. They should have seen it from the beginning. Nova opened her mouth to complain, but the room fell silent as a deep, echoing piano began playing a soft yet filling melody. The throne room engulfed in a wondrous harmony. Ferguson and Cassie were up first, calmly and purposely walking towards the twin thrones. Ferguson throwing flirtatious looks towards Cassie, but the head of security service took it with the stoic face as she did with all things Ferguson. Alfonso and Lillian went next. The little pixie sat on Alfonso's shoulder while the two walked, their rapid-fire whispering intense and urgent. Ponyhead began neighing and laughing loudly, bumping into her husband eagerly and trying to catch his attention, but Stahl kept his gaze on the floor, trying to draw as little attention as possible. The crowd snapped as one, their gaze focused on Connor and Nova, causing the two to shift uncomfortably under such attention. Nova felt her feet rooted to the spot, her body unwilling to accept any commands other than run and run faster. She felt so embarrassed, so exposed. She didn't think she could do this. She felt her body tingle as Connor slipped his arm around hers, taking a step forward and pulling Nova into action. Nova fell into step at once, tightening her grip on Connor as the walls felt like they were beginning to tower over her, the stares of the guests frightening the young princess. They were judging, comparing her to her mother, her grace, her appearance, her... Nova, Connor whispered softly. It's okay. They are just here for a wedding, not to judge you. I got you. Just 1 foot forward. Nova matched Connor's stride. And now the other. And now, the other. Nova gave a small nod, releasing an anxious breath from her lips as she began smiling and waving towards the crowds, their faces shifting from indifference to joy. See? Connor muttered as the pair reached Marco, nervously twitching as he waited for Star's arrival. Nova and Connor parted, taking as much time as they could before letting go of one another, moving to take their places with the others. The piano changed effortlessly to the wedding march, the entire room staring backwards, rising to their feet as the doors opened once more. Star had changed into a beautiful white wedding gown, intricate and well-designed patterns covering the queen from head to toe. The wedding veil stitched in a way that star shapes were clearly visible, her wedding train being lifted and carried by an adorable soul who waved to everyone like he was the star of the show. Nova couldn't help but beam with bliss and pride as Star reached Marco, the stunned look on her father's face letting Nova know he was falling in love all over again. Nova hoped to have someone like that one day, to find someone who loved her as much as her parents loved each other, who would just want to spend every moment they could with her, regardless of what they were doing. No one could see Star's face under the veil, but it wasn't too hard to hazard a guess given how she stood there, unmoving, staring in Marco's direction. The priest lightly coughed, a sound that grew louder than it should have over the silence of the hall.
We are gathered here today to rebond these two in holy marriage. It was 15 years ago that I had the honor of marrying these two fine, amazing adults. But due to the political nature of their marriage, Star Butterfly remained Star Butterfly. You two have fought long and hard to unite your two dimensions. And you did so while caring for a lovely family.
Nova tried to hide her burning face when the priest gestured to her and then Soul, who began cutely waving towards everyone, clearly enjoying all the attention.
And just as it was my honor to do so all those years ago,
The priest continued,
I now have the honor to do so again. Do you, Marco Ubaldo Diaz, take Star Butterfly to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and care for her, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?
Marco let out a loving sigh, holding onto Star's hands even tighter.
I do.
And do you, Star Butterfly?
Heck yes, I do!
Star interrupted, bouncy and looking like she was about to achieve liftoff. Everyone let out a barely contained chuckle while Moon shook her head at Star's antics. The priest gave a hearty laugh, trying to suppress a grin.
I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may now kiss the bride you were already married to.
Marco leaned in to kiss Star, but Star took the lead. She wrapped her arm around Marco's waist, dipping him dramatically and planting the biggest, fiercest kiss she could to the cheering of the crowd. Pulling him back to his feet after a few moments, Marco now dazed, confused, and love-struck.
I present to you,
The priest said over the booming crowd,
Mr. and Mrs. Diaz!
Nova and Connor stared knowing glances as they clapped and whooped loudly at the sight of Marco and Star Diaz sharing another kiss.